Welcome back for another edition of Political Breakfast. I'm Lisa Ram, and with me here today, Brian Robinson and Theron Johnson. It's a busy time. Political season just ramping up here.
Getting very close to the May 21st primary?
Yeah, right around the corner. So that'll be interesting to see how people finish in that particular race. Looking ahead to November, though, a new CNN article highlights Kamala Harris's efforts to reach black voters. They say she's doing major outreach on two spectrums, black leaders in finance, tech, and influencers in black culture, and then connecting with more working class or middle class voters. So I guess my question is, how is Trump responding? Do you feel his response? Do you see his response? Although his campaign did promise one, I'm just not sure if it's happening yet.
Well, listen, Lisa, I think if Vice President Kamala Harris was on this podcast right now, she would share with you that, look, she definitely understands her identity. She understands who she is. But she would also pivot, which is what I'm about to do, is look at her record. Look at her trajectory. Look at this woman who went on to be a district attorney, U.S. Senator from California, and now she's the first woman of color, the first black African-American Vice President of the United States of America. So it's sort of inferred. I mean, you just can't look at her skin color and her appearance. I mean, you got to look at her track record. And this is a very smart woman who went to a HBCU. And so now the Biden campaign has continued to deploy her in the right circles because she's a walking example of the American dream. She is a walking example of the prosperity and the trajectory that many of us as African-American entrepreneurs want to be like. We understand that confluence and that intersection between politics and government. And I think that's why when you mentioned that, Lisa, she's talking to folks in tech, she's talking to entrepreneurs, she's talking to folks in healthcare, infrastructure, AI. Like, these are people who are people of color who I think can go back and amplify the Biden's Harris administration message. Now, I said this the other week, and Brian knows what I'm going to say. He's going to say, well, you always talk about that black man that has an E-Tray app on his phone, right? Well, let's get back to the streets. And so what I like about what the campaign is doing, we're going back to the streets. We're going back to really where we started with the Obama campaign. I mean, they're doing house parties. They're doing meet and greets. People are literally getting in living rooms. And more importantly, what she's doing, Lisa, which I like, is that she's listening. I've actually had a chance to spend some really quality time with the vice president. But I walk away feeling like I was heard. I walk away feeling like I was seen. And what I think you're going to see with her role is not just trying to just tell them what they should do. Like, she doesn't talk at the African American community. What I'm hearing from folks who are actually, I know several members that are on the campaign team with her, is that they're engaging in some real conversations. And let me just say this, and I'm going to turn it over to B-Rob. You already saw him last week, Lisa. We had this African-American woman sitting next to me, and Brian immediately put her in a focus group. I mean, it was just like,
I did.
Oh, Lisa, he sees any
highly
black
educated,
highly educated black woman. And
Zoom, radar.
She was a doctor too, right?
Yeah.
And Brian looks at me, I start talking to her. And by the way, her name is Dr. Green. I hope she downloaded the podcast.
Theron stayed on her about downloading the podcast. I mean, he was on it. Like a dog with a bone.
The one thing I hate, Lisa and Lily, just so y'all know this, when people come up to me and say this to Brian all the time, oh, we listen to you all the time. Okay, do you listen to us on WABE 90.1, hear Lisa Ram's beautiful voice, or do you listen to us on the podcast? And if they say they haven't downloaded the podcast, I literally harass them until they take their phone out.
Yeah, they'll grab their phone.
They'll
grab their phone and download it for them.
But this is, we're not like the other podcasts in Georgia. We want to keep it real and take people into the board rooms and the conference rooms, and nowadays me and B-Rod, we're actually in gymnasiums and hospitals doing talks with different groups. But he asked her a simple question: where was her enthusiasm like? How enthusiastic are you about President Joe Biden? And her answer was like, she didn't really answer first. She said, well, I know one thing: I'm not voting for Donald Trump. I know I'm not gonna. I don't want him there.
Very telling answer.
And
very
then,
telling answer.
But when he came back to it, she kind of expressed a little bit more that, nothing really heavily critical. But I guarantee you, when she was done hearing me talk, because I did a whole infomercial for the campaign, Brian was laughing at me. I think that's what Kamala Harris has got to do. You got to ask people, hey, where are you really right now in this administration? Yeah. And if they say that they're not totally all in, don't dismiss them. Listen to them, which is what I did. And I think that I'm going to be able to get her enthusiasm level up, because she's already told me she's not voting for the other guy. I just got to get her to turn out.
Well, Brian, you said her answer was very telling. What did her answer tell you?
She didn't say yes. When the question was, are you a Joe Biden supporter? She wasn't like, yeah. She was, well, I don't like Trump was where she started. And what that says right off the bat is just this lack of enthusiasm. And I said there are three groups right now as far as targeting black voters in Georgia. You've got those who are traditional Democrats who are going to vote for Joe Biden. They may or may not like him, but they're voters. They always show up, and they're going to vote for their party's nominee. There are those who don't like Trump enough to consider him, but aren't enthusiastic about Biden, don't think that he's on top of things. They don't feel like their life is better than it was 4 years ago. Inflation has hurt their buying power, and they may just stay home. And Democrats have got to have that big black voter turnout in order to be competitive in Georgia. And then the third group are this percentage, and it's somewhere between 10 and 20%, in my guess. If it's between 15 and 20%, Republicans are going to win in Georgia, who are going to vote for Trump. So those are the three groups that we're looking at here. And Harris has got to do a couple of things. Number one is motivate the Dr. Green demographic, the people who, if they show up, will vote for Biden, but aren't necessarily going to show up. Because if you're not enthusiastic about that race, there's nothing else to really bring you out in Georgia in 2024. There's no U.S. Senate race. There's really not going to be any congressional races that are competitive. There are state House races and state Senate races that are very meaningful, and people should go vote for them. But most Georgians don't know who their state legislators are. It's not a motivating race for them. They're not going to show up for it. So the fact that Harris keeps coming down here and doing black-specific events shows that lack of enthusiasm, trying to generate some energy there. They sent down the second gentleman, Doug, a couple of weeks ago, right? And I was like, is this where we stand? I'm sure Doug's a swell guy. But I was talking with the AJC's political columnist, Patricia Murphy, last week. And, she said they're sending out Harris and then now Doug, and nobody cares. Doesn't generate like a big response in the state. No one, it seems to just be contained to whatever room she is in. So that's sort of a problem.
So the undecideds that are sitting in the balcony right now, when do you expect them to shift? Will they shift, or what's happening with them, that pool of voters, Darren?
So let's wrap this focus group up that Brian did. So by the end of the day, right, I want to make sure that we don't mischaracterize Dr. Green's sort of point. I believe that she's going to vote for President Joe Biden. Now, whether she does it enthusiastically or not, B-Rob is right. Like that's what campaigns are for, right? I mean, we're in May. I mean, and keep in mind, the biggest turnout model that we have in Georgia is former President Donald Trump. All right, the minute he starts talking more, the minute he goes and criticizes someone, the minute more, negative information comes out about him, and the minute he says something to just totally disrespect women and disrespect people of color, I think that the Dr. Green's enthusiasm of the world will come out. And so, look, the American people are going to have to make a choice. And I believe that if we have the turnout that we had or more in 2020, we win. And I want to push back on this whole thing about, Vice President Kamala Harris is coming here because we're weakness with the black community. No, I mean, we don't say that when all these white surrogates come down here and talk to predominantly white audiences in the Republican Party, because I can make that same case, right? They're not coming because I don't think y'all are bleeding with a lot of white men. I think where it's hurting you all, B-Rob, is that you're not sending enough white women to Georgia that are willing to go on the record and support Donald Trump. And so I think it's a reverse tactic. Vice President Kamala Harris is coming down to think and to motivate and amplify a constituency of people who are going to vote with us versus the Republican Party. You guys have got more, I think, bringing, as you mentioned, bringing people back to your party. And I think those surrogates are not doing it as much as they're doing. So again, it's really about making sure that this community feels heard, they feel appreciated, and they want to go out and vote. Now, the reason I'm using Dr. Green as an example, Lisa, because I want to, my heart and my mind has got to be clear in November, because I remember that day being in New York when I was looking up at that ceiling and I was there at the Hillary Clinton campaign, and there was no glass ceiling being broke, right? I remember people sitting on the floor crying like, oh my God, what the hell just happened? So I am kind of doing my part in this podcast to really try to speak to the Biden campaign to say, look, you can't just think every single black person is going to be with you at this juncture. It's just impossible. Like, it's, Joe Biden is not perfect, but he's doing so much more than the other side. And so it's left up to me to let our listeners know that, like, hey, there is a enthusiasm problem out there. There is apathy, but ultimately we got to let them be heard, and we got to have those conversations. And I think that's why Vice President Harris is doing what she's doing to shore up this base of voters.
Trump had a rally in New Jersey on Saturday, which is a bit counterintuitive because you wouldn't think of New Jersey as being a state that's on the board for Republicans, and it's probably not. I would imagine they had it there because it's easy to get from where he was for the court dates last week, right? But one of the special guests up there on stage with him was Lawrence Taylor, who, of course, was a very famous New York Giants football player in the 80s. Won numerous Super Bowls. So he was like, when I was a kid growing up, he was this massive star. And, he's up there on stage, obviously a black man, and he is saying, I'll never vote for a Democrat again. This is my guy. Now, does Lawrence Taylor bring a lot of votes with him? No. But he is an example of what Republicans need to continue to do, to have an inclusivity about black voters who are with them. Make sure that black voters know that they have the permission structure to vote Republican. And folks like LT provide a little bit of that. I'm not saying it's a mass movement, but we got to keep doing it. And I'll end with this. I do believe that the Trump campaign in Georgia understands that this state will be competitive, even though Trump has been leading here by margins outside of the margin of error for some time. They know that gap's going to close, and they've got to pull some rabbits out of the hat. I think you're going to see them put their money where their mouth is on this, and they're going to target black men 18 to 45. That is what Republicans know is the most movable group of traditionally Democratic voters who are curious, at least, about voting for Donald Trump. So we're going to start seeing money put toward them. People just a little bit younger than Theron.
It's going to take more than LT. Let me just say this real quickly.
I agree.
Yeah, look. You can't just throw athletes at us. You can't just throw rappers. You can't just throw reality.
Well, especially
TV
one who wasn't he accused of rape, and he pled guilty to some misdemeanor charges and related to it. So
and that's where I'm torn, right? I wasn't going to say all those things, but you, Lisa, that's why you're a great host. You keep us honest. LT, Hall of Fame, great guy. I love watching him, but he's had some issues, and like many black men, right? Let me not do that. Let me not criticize him for the mistakes that he's made in the past. And shout out to LT if he wants to get up there and stand with Donald Trump. I'm just saying, Lisa, black people are smarter than Republicans think we are. You can't just throw surrogates out there whether they've had a troubled past or not. It's at the end of the day, where are you on the issues that matter the most to us? And it's at least a dozen of them. And I guarantee you that if we laid out those dozens of issues, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are better on those issues than Donald Trump and whoever his nominee is going to be. And that's what we got to remind black voters. Don't be fooled. Don't be hoodwinked. Hosea Williams used to say, unbought and unbossed, right? We're not going to let these people come in here and try to buy our vote. You see the NAACP coming out of me now, Lisa. We're not going to come in here and try to basically, pull covers over our face and to tell us that, oh, he's this great man because you know him personally. At the end of the day, where are your policies? How are you moving our community forward? What did you do when you were in the White House, and what have you done since you left the White House to help black and brown people? And I think that that's what the Biden campaign has got to continue to focus on, and let Donald Trump continue to roll out all these people and try to say, hey, look at this black person that's supporting me. I don't think it's going to work. I think black people are smarter. But now, lastly, Democrats, we got to have a conversation. We better be ready. You heard what B. Rob just told you. He gave you the playbook. They're going to target black men between the ages of 18 and 45. I just missed the mark. I'm 46. But you ain't got to worry about me. I'm good. But there are my friends. There are my friends that we need to make sure we continue to focus on.
Yeah, I was just thinking about LT's criminal history. Well, reminded me of that.
Yeah, to be correct, I just want to make sure we're correct. He pleaded guilty to 2 sexual misconduct charges involving I don't want to keep going here, but anyway,
Right.
yeah.
But here's the challenge, right? Because see, and this is where you got to be careful, and I'm going to be real careful on this podcast. I am not going to criticize LT for the mistakes that he made, and he pled guilty. It was wrong, right? He pled guilty. He did his time. He paid his fine.
Right.
Now he's gone out, right? So we got to be careful as Democrats, because one of the things that we get criticized about, Lisa, is that we come off a little elitist sometimes, which is one of the same reasons why I really struggled about Herschel Walker. I admit it. I grew up a Herschel Walker fan. I grew up in Athens before B. Rob and all his friends came down there and drunk up all the liquor and go to the Georgia games. I remember the Herschel Walker, Garrison Hurst, Worley, Hampton days, right? Hines Ward. I saw those guys. So I was very conflicted, Lisa, to really go at him so hard, which I did sometimes on this podcast, because at the end of the day, he's still a black man, and I'm a black man. So what Democrats have got to do is point out that LT does have those things. Like, that is his history, but also make LT into an example that he doesn't represent, I think, the vast majority of black voters who believe in prosperity, who do believe in second chances. But I think that Joe Biden has got to continue to talk to those voters as well.
Yeah. Republicans don't need the vast majority, and they're not planning to get it. They need to get about 15, 20%. And hey, look, I agree. He doesn't bring a lot of folks with him. Representation matters, as liberals always tell me, and making sure that black Republicans are seen and profiled, all that's important for the long-term trajectory of the party.
Thanks, guys, for your perspective on all of this. We'll do it again next week. The GOP convention is happening in Columbus. And Brian, I know you got a lot of things percolating in your brain that you want to talk about regarding this. And we'll do that next week on next week's Political Breakfast. But until then, y'all have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Thanks, guys, and go vote early.
Vote.